A big key to Melanie Faye's style is she'll take simple jazz ideas like this 2-5-1 progression, and she'll add other notes from the scale via these nice flourishes. So a D minor 7 becomes this. G7 becomes something like this. And for the C major 7, we can do things like this. Melanie also mixes chords and leads by taking two common things like a minor 7 chord and a pentatonic scale and combining them. We're starting with Melanie's solo guitar version of the jazz standard Misty, which highlights a ton of her chords, mixing chords with leads, and overall just groovy playing. But first, let's quickly summarize the overall neo-soul guitar playing of today. It's essentially jazz chords and jazz harmony, hence why you hear a lot of jazz standards like Misty, but the groove is often more hip-hop or R&B inspired as opposed to a standard jazz swing style. So even if you play the exact same chords but just change the groove, you'll see it sounds very, very different. And when soloing over these grooves, a more jazzy style focuses on circling chord tones with chromatics, but the neo-soul style is much more pentatonic with triads and focusing on something a bit more lyrical. So I want to keep this tight and giving you a lot of things you can apply to other songs, so rather than going through the big harmonic analysis, all the theory of why Misty works, if you want that, it's linked below on oneguitarcourse.com, but we're just going to focus on the highlights and the cool things that Melanie Faye does with the song. So if we look at the intro, it might seem kind of complex because we have all of these big chords like this and like this. But what's actually happening here is fairly simple. So we're starting with an E major chord. It just also has the 7th and the 9th. So it's an E major 9 and it looks like this. So whenever you're playing music, anytime you see E triad, E major 7, E major 9, you can always play this particular shape. And the next chord is a little bit more tricky to identify, but in order to play it, we're just adding in our second finger on the A string on the 3rd fret like this. So we play that regular E major 7, E major 9 shape. We throw down our second finger, and we have this chord. Now, what this chord really is, if we ignore the open string for a second, this chord is really just a G sharp dominant 7th starting from the 3rd. So you probably already know this G sharp 7 chord. If I start from the 3rd and play the same chord, we get that shape. And then we're just adding in that high E string for a bit of tension. That's all it is. And the next chord is just a C sharp minor 7th chord. We're adding in other notes for a bit more color. So you probably know this C sharp minor 7 chord. We're playing it like this, because that allows us to add in other notes like this. But that's a great thing you can do on other chords. And then as we continue, things get a bit more simple. So we have an A sharp minor 7 flat 5, leading us to an A major chord. She plays it like this. So we're playing this shape and then hammering on the other notes. So whenever you want to play a major 7th chord, you can add those things in as well. And that's a pretty cool neo-soul little thing as well. And then we're just doing some minor chords leading back to our E major. And a little harmonic to end it off. And And that's basically the intro. A big thank you to today's sponsor, Sweetwater, who supplied me with this lovely Melanie Faye signature model by D'Angelico. If you're interested in any other D'Angelico guitars or really any guitar gear at all, definitely check out Sweetwater, and I'll link below some of my favorite gear that I bought from Sweetwater. As we move to the song, she plays the melody line on the high E string, leading to this nice E major 7 shape. So it goes like this. And our focus here is just going to be on this chord shape for a major 7th chord, because it allows us to add in other notes with our other fingers. So for example, we can use our 2nd finger to play that shape. We can use our 3rd finger right here. And if we just combine those different ideas, we get something like this. So any of those notes all these different notes are totally fine to use for an E major 7th chord. So this is a really great shape for that neo soul kind of a thing. And she immediately goes to another really smart idea here for playing these little flourishes. So we're going to play a 2-5-1 idea. It's going to be B minor 7 for our 2 chord. Our 5 chord is E dominant 7. And we can play it right here by just barring with our 1st finger on the 7th fret. So for example, you probably know this B minor 7 shape. You probably know this E dominant 7 shape. But if we just leave our 1st finger down and bar everything, B minor sound if we focus on the low E string, and then we get an E7 sound if we focus on the A string. And that works really well because, of course, a lot of jazz and a lot of neo soul is 2-5-1 ideas. But we take that a step further now by looking at what mode is in that area. And that's going to be the Dorian mode. Guys, this is getting too complex for you. I explain this all in much slower detail over on the site. But even if you ignore all the theory and you just use these simple shapes for now, it'll still be very helpful. So all the notes from B Dorian work for B minor 7 and also E dominant 7. So we can just play anything from right here. And they all sound really good in this context. And that's exactly what she does. And if you really want to emphasize that chord change from minor to dominant 7, we just have to focus on playing the bass note as we do those flourishes. So for example, like this, minor chord, dominant chord, something like that. So then we're moving to another major chord, in this case is A major 7, and I found 2 cool shapes. She doesn't play this next part as chord shapes, but I played them as chord shapes because then we could do other cool flourishes. So the first one is this A major 7 right here. Beautiful chord. And then we have this one right here. So if you know your normal A major 7 shape like this, just memorize that the shape is also right here. And to start off that chord, we could actually slide into that note. Because we're moving from the major 7th to the root A. Now in the performance of Misty, we're going back to another 2-5-1. This time it's A minor 7 to D dominant 7. And she does this same little cool trick I showed you before with this barring of the 1st finger. Minor 7, dominant 7. But instead of just doing flourishes, she actually plays the pentatonic scale. So another good tip here is that whenever you have a 2-5-1, you can take the 1st minor chord and play a pentatonic scale over the whole thing like this. And again, all of those notes work over the minor chord and they all work over the dominant chord. And when we get to the C sharp minor 7th chord, she does another really cool thing. The normal C sharp minor 7 will look like this, but she plays this little lick. So again, we're just playing a normal minor 7th chord, and we're doing little hammer-ons and pull-offs to get other notes from the scale. Very, very common thing. Whenever you see your minor 7 shape, you can do stuff like that as well. Before she returns to the whole E minor 7 thing to restart the section, we have a turnaround. A lot of people, when they're just starting jazz or they're just starting neo-soul, sometimes they spend too long memorizing a lot of different types of turnarounds and trying to figure out the little theory behind each thing. Again, that's all really helpful, and I teach that stuff as well. But sometimes it's just good to learn a sequence and to just store that in your memory and say to yourself, that turnaround works when I'm going back to the 1 chord. And so again, rather than focusing all the theory, let's just work on these 4 chords leading to a 1 chord, and then we can apply that to any time we want to go back to a 1 chord while we're playing. So for example, she does this. To the E major 7. So we could take that whole idea and now just move it around and just memorize that little lick. So let's just say we're playing a song in the key of C major 7, and we're doing this C major 7. We'll just apply that whole turnaround like we just did over there. So of course the turnaround turns everything around, and then we play the same thing again. But now in this second version, we're playing it with more of a groove. And if you want to learn how to play that, again, the tab, it's free, it's linked below. But to complete playing it the second time, we play something called an ending. And just like in jazz and neo-soul, you have many different types of turnarounds to restart the form. You also have a bunch of different forms of endings to end the form. So Melanie Faye doesn't play it exactly like how I'm going to teach it to you, but it's really, really cool, and it's pretty similar to how she likes to do it. So we conclude by playing an E major 7 chord, or we can play it like this, of course. And then we're going to go back and forth playing these 2 chord shapes. It's a minor 9 chord shape like this, and a dominant 7 chord shape like this. Now, we're going to be overlapping these 2 shapes, and don't worry about why it works. Just trust me, it works. Listen to how it sounds, and you can memorize it in reference from that major shape, so you can end up applying it to a lot of other things as well. So it sounds like this. Really, really beautiful in the key of E. So the best way to visualize this is to look at your major 7 shape, where we can apply this to any key, but of course we're in the key of E. So we take our normal major 7 chord, we look at where our pinky is, we go to that fret, in this case it's fret 9, and we play our minor 9 shape. We look at our pinky again, in this case it's fret 11, and we go to that fret and play our dominant 7 shape. We repeat the same thing again. Look at our pinky, go to that fret, play a minor 9 shape again. Look at the last note. I'm not using my pinky anymore, but same idea, same shape. And we go to that last note and play our dominant 9 chord from that fret. And then from there, if we stay on that same fret and go to a major triad, we have our key again. And it's a major triad with the root right here on the B string. So E major triad. And the cool thing is, we can use the note that we're playing with our pinky and always hammer on or pull off to change the feel a little bit. So for example, when we get to this first minor 9 chord, we could play this or just this. So So there's an ending to end today's lesson. Again, if any of this was too fast for you, if I talked too fast, if the theory wasn't clear enough, if you don't know your modes yet, if you don't know your seventh chords yet, no matter what your questions are, I have it all for you over at oneguitarcourse.com. One-time payment, lifetime updates, tons of different lessons from different genres. Everyone who's purchased the course has really liked it so far, so check it out. It's linked below.